Welcome back to Mentor Nation, the podcast for entrepreneurs looking for real mentorship, real strategies, and real stories so that you can go out and build your dreams. I'm your host, John Abbas, and it's time for another episode, so buckle your seatbelt and let's go. Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Mentor Nation. I'm your host, John Abbas, and today I have a guest that is going to knock your socks off. Tom Black has one of the most insane self-made stories that I have ever heard. He was born in an actual railroad boxcar, and he grew up in an extremely poor family. After high school, he discovered sales after getting recruited to go door to door, selling books in the summertime so that he could pay his own way through college. It was this uncomfortable and very difficult experience that completely changed his life. And we're going to talk about how those summers of going door to door taught him the skills to become a self-made multimillionaire dozens of times over. He has started many companies, of which 3 went public and 1 sold for $1 billion, and that is a billion with a B. Since that time, he has become one of the largest wine collectors in the world, and I've actually been in his wine cellar. It is one of the craziest things I've ever seen. It's fully temperature controlled. There's actually 2 in his home, but the big one holds 20,000 bottles of the rarest and most expensive wines on earth. And I'm going to post the video on our Instagram with this episode. Today, he has a passion for entertaining A-list celebrities at his estate in Nashville, and he is also the author of one of the greatest books on sales ever written, The Boxcar Millionaire. Today, we are going to talk about mindset and sales. If you are struggling with sales, or you're already great, but you want to get better, or if you've never even done sales, but you know it's an important skill set that can improve the quality of your life, you are really going to love this episode. And even if you aren't in sales, there's just so much value in the mindset and the stories that Tom shares that you're still going to walk away energized and wanting more. Now, really quick before we bring Tom on, if you have not followed the podcast on our new Instagram page, please do so. You can find us on Instagram at Mentor Nation Podcast. And again, that is at Mentor Nation Podcast. That is the best way to connect with me, give me feedback, ask questions, and just stay in touch. Okay, let's start the show. All right. So Tom, thank you so much and welcome to the show.
Well, I'm glad to be here, John. And of course, I always love to see you.
Appreciate that. So I want to start off the podcast and I just want to ask you a question. I mean, I know you've accomplished a million things in your life, but I wanted to ask, what accomplishment that are you most proud of and why?
So, I knew you were going to ask me that, and I thought a lot about it. And there are a lot of things that I'm proud of that I've been a part of. But first of all, I want to say most of the things that I'm proud of, I didn't do on my own. I had a great team of people around me. I had a great mentor around me. It wasn't exactly all on my own, but I'm really proud of the number of jobs that over my lifetime I've created by starting companies and growing those companies through sales. It's literally thousands of jobs that, in my business career I've created for other people. And when I walk around a company that I was involved in, maybe I was the first employee, maybe I was the second, maybe I was never an employee, just a co-founder and investor. But when I see those companies grow to hundreds and even more than 1,000 employees, I'm really proud of that.
That's very inspirational. So, Tom, for the audience listening here today, we're going to talk about sales. And, as the audience is going to get to know, that's really what you are, in my personal opinion, the best in the world at. But we're going to talk about how sales can solve almost any problem in business, the mindset around sales, and just why and how to create sales systems so that you can drastically scale revenue and profits. And so for you, I know that you've had some really big wins in your life. You've been a co-founder of 3 companies that went public. One of them went on to sell for $1 billion. You've personally built several multi-million-dollar companies from scratch. And today you're one of the most well-known wine collectors in the world, and you entertain some of the biggest names in music and entertainment. I stalk your Instagram. I don't know if you know that or not, but me,
That's funny.
Yeah, me and Kat were sitting in the living room like, holy crap, Tom is like, this person is at Tom's house right now. But, it's crazy because when it boils down to it, you were handed nothing in your life. Like, you were born and raised in a boxcar, hence the name of your book, Boxcar Millionaire, which I highly recommend, by the way, to anybody listening to this. If you are in sales or you are an entrepreneur, you need to go pick up the Boxcar Millionaire. It is one of the most unbelievable books I've ever read. It's a mixture of strategies and story, and I highly recommend that you go grab that. But out of everything that you've built, you've created that through sales. And I just wanted to see if you could take us through that journey. How did you become the Boxcar Millionaire?
So when I was born, my parents were living in a railroad boxcar. And my brother and sister and I were in one end, my parents in the other. We did everything in the middle except go to the bathroom. We did that outside. Very quickly after that, we moved into a house. I still shared a room with my sister for a while until she moved out. But the fact that I was poor wasn't evident to me until about sixth grade. Some kids made fun of my clothes. I went home. I had an emotional meeting with my parents, and they said, yeah, we're poor, duh. But they said that you don't have to be. They said there's a ladder that goes straight out of the house. You can climb on it as high as you want. It's the free market enterprise in the American system of education. They didn't say it that eloquently, but that's what they meant. And so they encouraged me to be the first person in my family to graduate from high school. And so I did graduate from high school. And then I graduated from college. And while I was in college, a man approached me and said if I would go away from home all summer long, work 84 hours each week, so that's 14 and a half hours a day, 6 days a week, go to a town I'd never been to before, without a car, find my own place to live, pay my own expenses, and sell books on a straight commission, that I can make enough money in the summer to go back to college in the fall. And so I did that. And there were about 7,000 students doing it when I did. It wasn't a small company. It's the oldest continuously operating business in Tennessee. It was founded in 1868. And there are still lots of college students every summer that sell books door to door to pay their way through college. And some very famous ones too. But the name of the company was a Southwestern company. And that is where I learned how to meet and deal with people. So by the time I graduated, I'd been in 12,000 people's homes. And I'd had 3,000 or 4,000 customers during that time. And when I graduated from college, I'd done very well at that business. And so they hired me full time to recruit and train college students to put in the program. I did that for 4 years. And when I left, I'd had a lifetime of sales experience, frankly. And I had interviewed thousands of college students, and I had recruited and trained thousands of college students. So I got off to a fast start. A man named Bill King hired me. He had a $9 million company. We were selling products to banks. He hadn't had much success in retaining or training or having successful salespeople. And so he let me sell for a while. Then he let me build a team. And pretty soon, we had $1 billion company with a lot of other people's help, obviously, but we grew it, and it was a public company. He ran it as a public company, and I left that company financially independent. He was very generous. And so I took some of those winnings, some of that money, and I bought a little piece of software. And he was my partner, my main partner. And we started a company called Private Business. I was the first employee. I was the only CEO until we sold it. We sold it for $290 million. I was the largest shareholder, and I ran it for a couple of years as a public company. And then, too young to retire, bought another piece of software that turned into a check imaging company that turned into a core processor that sold to Fiserv for about $950 million. It wasn't quite $1 billion, John. And but what's $50 million among friends, right? That's right. Then I had another company called BankSource, and we were working on no ATMs in 2004, and we became the largest independent servicer of ATMs in the United States, about 40,000 ATMs. I sold that business in 2015. About 9 years ago, another man and I co-founded a company called In Contracts, and we've grown that to about 180 employees and about 1,300 bank customers. It's a software program for compliance for banks. But anyway, also at the same time, the last 7 or 8 years, I've been doing coaching and training, keynote speaking, done a lot of work with entrepreneurs in the under $5 million company class, done a lot of work with big companies with their sales organizations. That's how I got here today.
Man, that is an incredible story, just a world of experience. And I want to go back a little bit just to your experience with Southwestern, because you said that there's thousands and thousands and thousands of students, but obviously I'm sure based on your introduction to how you were introduced to Southwestern that probably a lot of them didn't stick with it. And I just wanted to have you talk, like, what's the attrition rate in something like that?
So 1/3 of the students quit, 1/3 spend their summer on the book field and don't come back with any money, but they do manage to pay their expenses and maybe save a little bit. And then 1/3 actually do very well. I was told by a woman recently, she said she was the number one American student and she had made $54,000 in the summer. But I know there have been other salespeople that have made over $100,000 in the summer.
Wow, that's incredible. What were some of the biggest lessons that you learned just in doing that? I mean, obviously, I can imagine discipline, how to overcome objections, but if you had to pull some of the biggest takeaways that you got from that experience and how you use that in business, what would you say they were?
Well, I don't know how long you want this answer, John, but I'm going to tell you several things, and then you just give me a high sign when you've had enough. But one thing I learned was that happiness was a way of traveling, not some place you arrive. Most people are about as happy as they make up their minds to be. I would go in homes where people had everything you could possibly imagine, plenty of money, big cars, big house, and I could tell that they weren't happy. And I'd go into shacks, literally shacks like I grew up in, and I would find the family happy, singing, having a good time. I learned that it wasn't anything to do with money or a place. It had everything to do with a state of mind. And I learned to think big. I learned to think really big. People can tell you a lot of things. If you're working and listening to this podcast, they have a start time and they have a finish time. And they have a quota if you're a salesperson. But the one thing they can't tell you is how big to think. And the people that I know that are successful have been thinking big all the time. And it's never too late to start thinking big, by the way, if you're listening to this, and I suppose you are, you wouldn't. That's an oxymoron. But anyway, so that's another thing that I learned was to really think big and to stretch my mind. And there's an exercise that I think people should do to learn how to think big. Another thing that I learned on the book field was the importance of persistence and determination. You know, like Calvin Coolidge said, nothing in the world will take the place of persistence. And it's absolutely true. The slogan, press on, has solved and always will solve the problems of the human race. And another thing I learned on the book field was the importance of comfort zones. You know, every time I asked people to buy those books, my butterflies went off in my stomach. Every time I went up to a door and I said, may I come in? Butterflies went off in my stomach. And I didn't like it. Not at all. But I taught those butterflies to fly in formation. And I taught them to fly in formation by tricks of thought. I hate the price. I love the prize. I hate the price. I love the prize. I want to win. I want to win. And these kinds of mental tricks allowed me to leave my comfort zone when other people wouldn't leave their comfort zone. And by the way, John, the biggest thing holding most people back is that they are unwilling to leave their comfort zone. And then I learned one other thing, John. I learned that selling is just good communication. None of us are good enough to trick people into buying our products. All the time, my whole life, I've heard people say, well, I just want to be myself. And sometimes I say it and sometimes I don't, but I always think, oh, that's why you wear that makeup, because you want to be yourself. That's why you get your hair cut that fancy dancy way, because you want to be yourself. No, we all want to be the best self we can be. And I would challenge anyone to tell me that they don't want to be the best communicator they can be. And to be the best communicator you can be means that you're going to be the best salesperson that you can be. Selling is neither good nor bad. It is decided by the salesperson whether it's good or bad, and it is nothing more than good communication.
Wow. So I can't tell you, there's 13 nuggets of wisdom in 3 minutes. I'm going to have to play this podcast, I think, in slow motion for my audience. But so when you moved from, recruiting college students and selling books to your first, obviously, company with your mentor, Bill, and you grew that from, I think you said 9 million all the way into almost $1 billion company. Did you just apply the exact same principles? Did you go in and start recruiting and treating them like, they were college kids and showing them the same things that you learned?
So it's an excellent question. And there was an evolution from what I was taught at Southwestern to what I applied in B2B selling. B2C selling door to door is not the same as B2B selling, but B2B selling has lots of the same elements. The KPI, the key performance indicators in B2B selling are key performance indicators, just like the key performance indicators were in door to door selling. And the people's emotions and their objections were exactly the same as their emotions and objections in B2B selling. But adjustments had to be made, obviously. Nobody wants to work 84 and a half hours a week. Nobody wants to work 6 days a week in B2B selling. Nobody wants to find their own place to live and work on a straight commission in B2B selling. But lots of the other things were the same, and I just applied the principles to the job, which is B2B selling.
Wow. So in your opinion, what does it mean to be a great salesperson? Is it a great communicator? Is it several things? Like, what's your definition of a great salesman?
Well, I think a great salesperson starts with a work ethic. Now, I have a friend who, if I had one sales call and it was life or death, I would put him on that sales call, even ahead of me. But he's not the greatest salesperson I know. He is the greatest one-time sales presenter I know. I have another man who's not as good at the presentation, but he'll outwork anybody that on the planet. And I consider him a great salesperson because he is going to pay the price to get the job done. Now, I also consider a great work ethic. I also consider a great salesperson someone who will follow a routine, because we know in sales, the research has been going on for 200 years. The first sales script in the English language was in the 1790s in England. In America, they found one from 1868. It's a systematic approach to selling that the great salespeople use. I heard a very famous sales trainer, more famous than me, say, "I don't believe in systems. I have to adapt." And I couldn't disagree with that more. I think we do have to adapt, but the beauty of the system is that it allows you to adapt. A mechanic should know what every tool in his toolbox is for and then apply the appropriate tools at the appropriate time. And that's what systematic selling does. So that's what I consider to be a great salesperson, those things, among others. Well, one other thing, John. I think a really great salesperson has to have a service attitude. I've never seen a self-centered salesperson who only cared about where his name was on the honor roll and how much money he took to the bank be ultimately really successful. The people that are really trying to help their customers are the ones who have the most success.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Now, I know that a lot of the people listening to this, most of them are entrepreneurs that are going to be listening to this. And, as an entrepreneur, one of the main things that we all have to learn to get good at is sales. And I know for me personally, one of the scariest things when I first started selling was just learning how to deal with objections and overcome them. What's the mindset that you would think that you need to have, or what advice would you give somebody that maybe they're a little bit newer to selling and just the idea of being rejected or overcoming objections scares them to death?
Yeah. Well, everybody has to overcome their fear of rejection. I was lucky. Early on, I had a manager who said, "Tom, they are not rejecting you. They are only rejecting your offer to sell. They couldn't possibly be rejecting you. They don't know you. Rejection is when your friends tell you to go home." And so that wasn't really rejection. It was just a no to my offer to sell. And, we get rejected every day. Want to go to dinner? No. Want to grab lunch? No. Will you give me a ride? No. And we learn how to deal with rejection. It's our mindset about whether it's permanent rejection or temporary rejection that causes us to not like it. And so the other thing is answering objections. I believe that good communication requires that we educate the prospect in an effort to meet their needs. If we're just answering the objection for answering the objection, that's not appropriate. But if we're answering the objection because we sincerely believe the product or service we're selling will help the customer, then we have an obligation, almost an ethical and moral obligation, to answer that objection. And so we want to do it in the most polite, sincere way we can, but we have a duty to answer the objection if the prospect is missing a benefit from the product or service we're selling.
Gotcha. Now, speaking on that, do you think that a lot of people are getting lazy when it comes to sales? Because I know personally, I see a lot of entrepreneurs now that they're trying to learn marketing and copywriting, and they're trying to do anything on earth to not have to sell something to somebody. And it's just, I see a lot of them spinning their wheels and they sit at home on their computer all day. What do you think the status is? Do you think people are becoming more and more lazy when it comes to sales? Do you think that sales has just kind of lost its way with a lot of people? I'm interested to hear your take on that.
Yeah, I think you're right. Absolutely. It's especially true of the entrepreneur. So I meet all these entrepreneurs through lots of different vehicles and lots of different avenues. And I find that they're not making outbound sales calls. They're trying to advertise on the internet. They're trying to find some promotion or some way to get people to call them, when in essence, most of the really big, great companies in America were not built that way. Oh, it's true there are some that were built that way, but Microsoft has a sales force, Oracle has a sales force, eBay has a sales force. I can't think of any of the big tech companies that don't send people out to sell. I had a friend tell me the other day, he said, Tom, if you're not paying for a service on the internet, then you are the product or service. And it's true. When they sell advertising, they're selling our our FaceTime on the screen. And so I think that, yes, short answer to your question, yes. People are looking for a way not to have to deal with people directly. And that's sad.
I could not agree with that more. And, there's another myth that I really wanted to chat with you about. I'm interested to hear this answer. So a lot of people believe that the only way they're ever going to become successful is they have to have the best product or the cheapest price. And I'm really interested to hear your opinion. I believe that it's the best salesmanship. I mean, you have to have a decent product, obviously, but I'm really interested to hear, what your take is on that.
So I was thinking about that before the interview. I have never had a product that was the lowest priced product of all my competitors. I've many times had the highest priced product, but a lot of times too, I've been in the middle of the price range. And so what I've tried to do is craft a way to talk to the customer so that they don't make a price decision. Every day, people in the United States make a decision on other things besides price. People aren't making a price decision when they buy a Mercedes. They aren't making a price decision when they buy a $2 million home. They're not making a price decision when they buy a $3,000 or $2,000 or even $1,000 suit. They're not making a price decision. They're making a decision on some other quality besides price. And so in my world, I try to find the values that will outweigh price for the product. One thing that I've used over and over again is this idea, and I think this is an idea everybody can use. We are the low-cost provider. We tell everybody we talk to, if price comes up, that the entry price is not the cost of the product or service. The entry price on anything is not the price of the cost, is not the cost of the price, cost of the product or the service. The whole relationship with the product or service is the cost. And so if you're the low-cost provider, what that means is you don't necessarily have the lowest entry price, but over the lifetime of your relationship with the product or the service you're selling, the prospect or the client benefits with a low-cost solution. Not the lowest entry price, but a low-cost solution. There are inherent costs in a car that breaks down. There are unbelievable. There are inherent costs in a car that isn't safe. There are inherent costs beyond the price of the car when you buy it. And so as a result of that, you can buy a higher priced car and still get the low cost proposition. And I think you can apply that to almost any product that you have. And we apply it to ours a lot when we're the high price provider.
Man, that's a really interesting perspective. And so I want to ask you, because I think this would be a really cool exercise, especially for the people that are listening to this that are maybe entrepreneurs that want to scale. Maybe they're solo entrepreneurs that want to grow. So I want to give you a scenario. And that scenario is, let's just say that you purchased a company today that's currently doing $250,000 in sales per year. And you see a lot of value in the company. You believe that it's a $25 million or more company. And you purchased it and, they have a super small sales team and they're just not really producing much. What would be some of the things that you would do on the first day? You just purchased the company, you took over. Like, what would you do today?
So this is not a hypothetical because I've done this 20 times at least. It's funny. And many more times where I've been hired to go in a couple of hundred times and do that very thing. So the first thing that I do is I establish KPIs. What are the key performance indicators for success in sales? If it's B2B, I know that it is 3 new meetings a week with prospects and 5 follow-up meetings. I know that. And so I establish that. Next thing I do is I establish the sales cycle. So in one of the businesses that I'm a co-owner in, our sales cycle is the phone approach, the in-first meeting, discovery meeting, the setup of a demo of the product, the setup of a proposal meeting for the product, a setup of an implementation, strategic, and customer service view for the product, close, bring to a point of decision about the sale. The sales cycle. Most businesses I go in can't tell you their sales cycle. They don't have a specific sales cycle, and that's a mistake. But those are the first 2 things I do. Then there's a lot of other things too, but those are the first 2.
That answer alone is worth, I think, anybody sharing this podcast with other people, because that's what a lot of us deal with. We just don't know. Like me personally, before I met you, I would have never known to do that. I would have never known, maybe the KPI part, like what are the most important metrics, but the sales cycle part and what to do after, I would be totally lost on, which is why I think it's so important to have somebody like you, teaching sales to people, which I'm going to give all of those resources a little bit later. So you also, currently you do a lot of coaching at a high level with successful entrepreneurs, with people really on all spectrums. What are some of the most common questions that you get right now?
Well, first of all, let me say that my most favorite entrepreneur to work with is the person who is just starting out and who's coachable. That's my favorite person to work with. And yes, I've worked with companies in different stages, even over $100 million. I've worked with the entrepreneur. Of course, I've had my own businesses where I've worked with entrepreneur, where I've had larger companies. But, the entrepreneur, it's just a really hard question to answer shortly and briefly. But basically, we have to start with a goal setting session so that am I answering your question?
Yes, sir. I was just asking, what are some of the common questions that you get from people?
So I start with a goal setting session. In that goal setting session, I usually ask the questions, but the questions they ask me they're varied. Entrepreneurs want to know, how do I hire a salesperson? Entrepreneurs want to know, how do I borrow money? Entrepreneurs want to know, where do I look to find an answer to this specific social media question? And, I'm not a social media expert, but those are the kind of questions that they ask. And I try to answer them or give them a resource that they can answer. That's a really hard question, John.
Yeah, no worries.
Because there's so many.
I needed to throw a curveball into the interview because you're so good at answering the rest of the questions. So I want to piggyback on that because obviously you still do a lot of coaching. And I think that's very powerful. It's very powerful to go from just being all over the board, from small companies to huge companies, and then to transition into coaching because you have a particular insight that you can give people. And so I guess another way to package that is, what do you think are some of the really big things holding people back from the coaching that you give them? So when you coach an entrepreneur, and you see a lot of potential in them, what are some of the commonalities that you see that's in their way?
It's always the same things. One, comfort zone. I've done it this way. I've gotten to this level of success. I'm not changing. But the problem is, if they don't change, they'll never grow to be a bigger company. The second thing is work ethic. I just don't want to work that hard. Fine. Then you're going to have to be happy with the growth you have and where you are, or slower growth, because this entrepreneur thing just requires a lot of hours. It just does. And, Bill Gates said, until you reach 50 million in sales, you shouldn't be taking vacations and you should be working most weekends. Now, I don't know if that's true, but that's what he did. And I think that it's a little extreme, but still, if you aren't working 60 to 90 hours a week, then you're probably in the wrong. Go to work for somebody else that doesn't require you to work that much. But those two are the biggest things always. It's always, I won't change, uncoachable. I call it uncoachable. And secondly, I don't want to work that hard.
It's funny because your advice is so logical, but I think a lot of people just don't want to hear that. They want an easy answer, a quick fix. We're in a microwave mentality with most things, instant rice, instant oatmeal. And so when somebody tells them you have to put in the hours and the work and get out of your comfort zone, they're like, man, is there not a better answer? But that's just the reality. It's
so funny. John, I just have to say this, and I know we're running out of time, but it's so funny. We talk about these people and we talk about them like they were instant successes, Microsoft, barely made it, in the first 5 years. And Paul Mitchell, one of the co-founders, slept in his car while he made sales calls. He had nothing. 17 years in business before Starbucks moved beyond 3 locations. 17 years before they moved beyond 3 locations. This year, by the way, Howard Schultz was named one of the 400 richest people in America. But the point is that, there is a price to be paid, and it isn't instant. It's never instant. It's long term. It's overnight successes really don't happen.
Absolutely. I have 2 more questions and then a really quick rapid fire, and then we're going to wrap up. So the first one is, what are some things that people can do, the audience listening, and what are some things that they can do today to really just sharpen their sales skills? Maybe they're not even in a sales career or a job right now, but they would love to learn sales. Like, is it certain books? Is it certain, practices? Like, what advice would you give somebody that really wants to sharpen their sales skills?
Well, you're not going to do it intuitively. You're going to have help from the outside. Charlie Tremendous Jones told me when I was 18, Tom, you're going to be the same person today that you will be 20 years from now, except for the books you read and the people you meet. Now, of course, we've added multimedia to that, but the point is still the same. You're going to have to get it from outside yourself. So I would hire a sales coach if you want to be a great salesperson. I would read sales books, but from respected authors who've done something, I read here was a best-selling book, No More Cold Calls. You know why it's best-selling? Because nobody wants to make a cold call, not because the material in the book was of a lot of value, although there is some good things in almost every salespeople's books that I've read. But that's what I'd be doing. I'd buy the book John mentioned, Boxcar Millionaire. I would go on my website if you like videos, and there's a whole set of video packages. They're 3 to 5 minute excerpts on different, very specific topics in selling, so you can watch them very quickly and be done with them. And, anybody that's listening to this that emails me and says, I'd like the John discount, the mentor discount, I'll sell you those packages for half price.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. It's a good deal. But anyway, you got to do things like that. You're just not going to get better by yourself. So I heard somebody say the other day, if you're in sales, you either have a coach or you're looking for one. And that's the truth.
Awesome. So to wrap up, I have one last question before a quick rapid fire. Is there any advice that you would give the audience just in general, whether it's life, whether it's business, just from all of your experience and your wisdom? Just keep in mind that most of the people listening to this are entrepreneurs, people that they already have work ethic, they're making things happen. Is there any words of wisdom that you want to leave them with?
So I was always told, work like everything depended on me and pray like everything depended on God. And I believe that there is a higher power. Whether you do or not, listening to this podcast is irrelevant to me, but I do want to share one idea with you. When the prisoners of war came back from Vietnam, over 50% of them died in prison. So, of course, we as a government wanted to find out if there were any central common denominators that allowed some to survive and some to die. And they didn't find any commonality in the ethnic background, in the educational background, in the states they came from, in the basic training camps that they went from. But the single biggest common denominator they found was a meaningful religious conviction. And I'm just trying to help people. And so I want to share that data with you and let you decide what you do with it. But I think that's one place to start as you build a new future for yourself and a bigger place in this world than you have now.
Man, it's incredible insight. So you ready for a few quick rapid fire questions?
Oh, okay. I thought we were done.
Oh, we have just a couple quick ones. So First is, if you could have lunch with anyone on earth still alive, who would that be?
Oh, I'd want to have, John, I don't know the answer to that. The first name that popped into my mind was Bill Clinton, George Bush, one of the former presidents,
Got it. Have you ever felt really hopeless or like a complete failure? Why and how did you overcome that?
I've felt hopeless many times, and I've felt like a complete failure many times. But, I just use tricks of thought. I use catchphrases. I use positive affirmations and, hate the price, I love the prize, get up, be the kind of person that goes over, under, around, or through any obstacle that stands in your way. Just little catchphrases that I use to get myself motivated and up and going. A defeat and a failure are two different things. Failure doesn't happen until the end of your life unless you give up. Defeats happen every day.
Awesome. My last question for you, Tom, is a lot of the people here may not know this, but you are one of the biggest authorities on the planet when it comes to wine collecting. I don't know anybody in the world that knows more about it than you. What is your favorite wine of all time?
So, John, I only know a couple of people that have spent more money on collecting wine than I have. But anyway, I appreciate you saying that. So, Decanter Magazine, the world's greatest wine magazine, interviewed me 10 or 12 years ago, and they asked me that same question. And I would answer it the same. I think it is 59 Latour or 61 Latour Pomerol. Both are Bordeaux's. And both, strangely enough, come from that same time period, 59, 60, 61. So that would be my answer.
Awesome. So finally, I just want to let the audience know where to connect with you, the best way to follow you, to reach out. Obviously, one of the biggest things is obviously people have to pre-qualify, but you do some high-level coaching for entrepreneurs. What would be the best way for everyone listening today to connect with Mr. Tom Black?
Go to my website, look at the products, and like I said, John, anybody that mentions mentoring and your new website, new app, I'll give a 50% discount too. But also you can just email me on my website. It's tomblack.com, tomblack.com. It's very simple, tomblack.com.
Awesome. And just to wrap up, guys, make sure, if nothing else, you pick up The Boxcar Millionaire. It is an incredible book. If you're an entrepreneur in sales, you need that book. So thank you so much, Tom, for being on the podcast. We appreciate having you.
Thank you, John. I hope I get to see you again soon.
Awesome. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed this episode. And my bigger hope is that you take 1 to 2 things that you learn and you just apply them in your own life right away. And I know for me, after I finished that interview, the biggest nugget that I applied right away was anytime I attempted to do something uncomfortable or just a little bit out of my comfort zone, I would always tell myself, I hate the price, I love the prize. I hate the price, I love the prize. I know that may sound small and insignificant, but that has helped me so much in so many different things that I've tried to do. Now, one last thing I want to make you aware of before we end the show is just something that I think could be of really great value to all of you. Now, Tom is mostly retired now, and he dedicates much of his spare time to coaching people that are in the early stages of business. And I believe he has a waiting list, but if something he said in this interview resonated with you and you would like to connect with Tom for personal coaching, you can actually do so by visiting him at tomblack.com. Now, if you would like him to coach you, just mention that you found him through the Mentor Nation podcast, and he has agreed to give a discount when spots are available. I believe that all of us need a coach, and having him coach me was one of the greatest decisions that I have ever made. With that being said, I will see you next week with another awesome episode. Take care and have a wonderful day.